Yeah, my first NFT was one of one version of my song Prophecy of the Morning Dew, which had already been out on DSPs and Spotify for years at that point. But it was just a song, it's really dear to my heart. So I thought this is a great one to start with. And someone collected it, someone bought it for 0.69 ETH. But there was a bit of like a betting war, which was cute. And I was like, what's going on? And yeah, that money ended up being more income for the song than I think 600,000 or 700,000 streams that we'd had at the time.
Wow.
And so that felt, exciting. I was like, what's going on here? And
welcome to the Vocal Lab. I'm Sarah Ramsey, and this show aims to pull back the curtain on the entertainment industry, where veterans give up-and-coming artists some of the information they wish they'd had when they were just starting out. Sort of a music industry primer, if you will. So Forrest Mortifee is a transgender recording artist, ancient futurist, and Web3 trailblazer, hailing from the unceded lands known as Vancouver, Canada. His interdisciplinary approach has led him to create a diverse range of works, including paintings, game designs, and an NFT museum of his life's work. As a songwriter, he draws from a range of influences, including jazz, pop, and neo-soul, with his work having garnered over 35 million streams to date. Featured on BBC Radio 1, Forbes, The Fader, Forrest Mortifee channels music and messages poignantly suited for our times. Thanks for joining me today, Forrest.
thanks for having me, Sarah. Great to be here.
I'm really excited to have you on the show. We were talking about this just before we got started. I have known Forrest
For a very long time.
Yes.
You were my nanny when I was very, very tiny.
Yes.
Yes.
I actually lived with their family, sort of in your universe.
Yes, totally. Totally.
Yeah. And so we go back a long way.
We do. It's
We
so
do.
good to see you.
Do you want to tell us your story briefly for those who might be meeting you for the first time today? A little bit about who you are and your journey in the business and how you got where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you well know, I grew up in a very musical family.
Yes.
Two of my aunts are, professional singers, and we still have Christmas parties where there'll be like 50 people singing carols all in harmony, which is just my fave, one of my favorite parts of Christmas. But I've always been drawn to the stage. There's a story of me at I think it was Vancouver Folk Fest as a young kid, and everyone's looking around and, where'd Forrest go? And there I am up on stage reaching for the microphone. I think it's like,
I love it.
I know, so cute. And I kind of, my first foray into the world of performance, I was singing Ladybug at age 6.
Very good.
Prestigious beginnings.
Indeed.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then just didn't really stop from there. Yeah, I was in 15 plays and musicals before I ended high school, started writing my own stuff at 14 and performing at 15, 16. And been releasing music pretty much since then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been really exciting to watch you develop, because I did get to see you as a kid and develop into your own right. Coming from a musical family, a thing that I can relate to.
Definitely, yes.
And watching you develop into your own artistic self has been a really cool journey to observe.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah. So here on the Vocal Lab, we aim to sort of shine a light on the industry through the lens of what I know now that I wish I'd known then. With that in mind, if you were starting your career over again, and I realize that you're still a young man. So, but with that in mind, is there anything that you would do differently?
I don't know if there is anything I would do differently, honestly. I think I followed my intuition.
Yeah.
And I went at my own pace. And I trusted my gut, and I didn't put myself in situations that felt not right for me. And if I did find myself in a room where I didn't feel fully respected, then I wouldn't re-enter that room again.
I think that that's so important.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a thing that young musicians don't always have the confidence to do, actually. I think, I know when I look back on my younger self, and I see it with my students and stuff as well, where they end up in situations, they take gigs or they work with people where they're not getting treated right, or I was in those positions too, where I wasn't getting treated right. But because of feeling kind of green in the industry, young, don't yet have the confidence or the wisdom maybe to feel like it's okay to stand up for yourself. So I really applaud you for doing that from the get-go, because that takes a lot of courage.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was, certainly like there was opportunities that you could look back and say that maybe I missed, or even today, the way I conduct myself, like there's certain spaces that I'm like, should I go? Should I participate in that? Should I show up? Should I network? And if my body is like, I would rather do something else, then I just really try and listen to that.
Do you want to talk about that feeling in your body for a second? Like, how do you identify that?
That's a great question. I really like try and get underneath the thoughts in my mind to see like what the feelings are. So if there's a thought like, oh, maybe I should go show up at that gig or that event where there's going to be people who I could network with, and maybe it can lead to something that I might want in the future, I'll go and I'll ask like, how are you feeling, to the voice that's actually saying that. And that voice might be like, well, I'm feeling kind of anxious, or I feel actually kind of burnt out, or I feel sad, and what I really want is just like genuine connection. And so kind of deeper inquiry into why I'm being called to do certain things has given me more insight into what I'm actually desiring. And then from there, I can take whatever step might feel best for that part of me. And it's not always just going and networking with people or showing up to something that seems like I should want to do it. Sometimes it's just staying home, meditating, or, watching an old movie, or like hanging out with my family, you know? So like, I really just listen to that as much as I can.
Well, and I think that sense of, I don't know if I'm going to use the right terminology for this, but that sense of like spiritual guidance or spiritual relationship is interlaced into your artistic journey, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That's been clear from what I've seen, the outside, but looking at your socials and things like that, that seems to be a really important part, and it's woven into your artistry.
Yeah. It is pretty woven in there. Yeah, it's definitely been a really important part of my life, and it gives me steam, it gives me purpose, it gives me peace. So yeah, it's like definitely a very dear part of me in my life.
Yeah. Now, I don't know, we may have already just answered this question, but is there anything else that you would do the same all over again?
I think like taking risks.
Yeah.
And like doing scary things.
Yeah.
Like for me, moving and like living in Toronto and like living in LA and other spots, and just kind of when there is a genuine like fire and curiosity going, and putting myself in situations that I feel inspired to explore.
Yeah.
Even though there's like butterflies.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that I've like done that.
How do you tell the difference between it's funny, I have a friend who uses the term scared sighted.
Yes.
Which
or
I
like
love.
Anxiety sometimes.
Anxiety. Yeah. And how do you differentiate between the good butterflies and the warning butterflies?
Such a great question. What is my answer to this? I think it's about, is there a part of me that feels like I should do it to make myself feel like or seem like enough? Or is there a part of me that wants to, is that kind of anxiety feeling, I want to do it because I'm curious and I feel like a calling to it that feels more like an opening rather than like trying to escape something.
I love that.
I think that would be my answer.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, and I mean, I know when I assess stuff in my own body, it's that sense of like lightening and opening versus heavy and closing.
Yeah.
And that when I remember, which is not always, to like tune in and
totally
and try and figure it out from that point of view, that's the sensation for me. But I really like that the curiosity or the should.
Yeah.
Because those are not the same thing.
They're not the same thing. No. No.
Nope. In an industry where we see wildly differing levels of education, and theory and all of that kind of stuff that supplement talent, some people have really formal education and some are completely self-taught. And in this industry, that's not a predictor or a requirement of anything.
Yeah, so true.
So it really can go a lot of different ways in pop music and contemporary music. What did your musical education look like and how has it impacted your work?
It's a great question. I, as I said, did lots of musical theater when I was young, and musical theater singing lessons. Shout outs Wendy Stewart. And so that was my most formal vocal training, I would say. I was in lots of choirs as well. And other than that, I haven't had much formal education. I've done kind of like one-off courses here and there around music production, which is not really my main like muscle that I flex in my practice. But yeah, not much formal education around music.
And like I said, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer to that, which is why it's a question that I tend to ask most of my guests actually, is to really open that up, that some people have extensive music education and it serves them well, or they identify where it has created roadblocks.
Yeah.
And both sides of that are true. And some people have no education and both of those things can be true.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally.
So I think it's an important conversation to have because there's an assumption sometimes that one is better than the other. And it's funny because both assumptions happen.
Yeah.
Some people really assume that more education is better and some assume that less education is better.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a hard and fast rule.
Yeah.
It's very personal.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to talk to me more or less like I'm a toddler.
Okay.
Because that is my level of understanding here.
Yes. You're going to ask for NFTs.
Yes, I am. Because I do not understand the world of NFTs at all.
Fair.
So explain it to me like I'm a child. And
cool.
I don't understand how music and NFTs intersect, really.
Yeah.
And because I'm somewhat familiar with your work, I understand that they can intersect.
Right.
Which before your work, I didn't know that.
Right.
I just thought, I don't know. It was mysterious. It's like cryptocurrency. I have no idea. It's a thing that other people understand and not me.
Yeah. That was me until I guess it was 2021 when this fellowship opportunity dropped into my lap. My friend Pat Locke, who's a producer also from Vancouver, he hit me up and he was like, I'm running this fellowships program for this crypto art organization I'm a part of. You should apply. And I was like, okay. I had been manifesting more abundance in my career. And I was like, maybe this is an opening. I'm just going to lean into this. And I remember filling out the application and I felt like so much of me was invited to the table that I wasn't used to in the traditional music industry. It was really asking me about all different parts of myself and my values and my curiosities and interests. And I felt so like whole in my entry to the Web3 space. And I was really grateful to receive the fellowship. And that was my on-ramp into Web3. And that's with an organization called Friends with Benefits.
Love it.
In brackets, not a sex thing.
I hope that's their tagline.
It's like our unofficial tagline. Yeah. Yeah. So, as part of my fellowship's collection, we had to mint an NFT at the end of it. And minting is just a word for like dropping or releasing. So my one-of-one version of my song Prophecy of the Morning Dew, which had already been out on DSPs and Spotify for years at that point. But it was just a song, it's really dear to my heart. So I thought this is a great one to start with. And someone collected it. Someone bought it for 0.69 ETH. But there was a bit of like a betting war, which was cute. And I was like, what's going on? And yeah, that money ended up being more income for the song than I think 600,000 or 700,000 streams that we'd had at the time.
Wow.
And so that felt, exciting. I was like, what's going on here? And I ended up connecting with the person who bought the NFT, and we've actually been working together quite closely for a year and a half now, and building out infrastructure in the space for indie artists and their fans to connect and share resources. But all this is to say, NFTs, the way I think of music NFTs, it's kind of like a special edition vinyl. But but instead of being in your hands, you get to own it on the internet in a place where there's proof of your ownership and that you purchased it directly from the artist.
Okay. So this is, I think, part of what I didn't understand with NFTs was like, so when I say I understand it at a toddler level, that's like, maybe being generous.
Maybe I didn't do the whole toddler.
No, that's okay. I'm going to ask you some questions because I thought, okay, well, does that mean like now they own your publishing for that song? Like I didn't understand what the thing was that you were selling.
Yeah.
So framing it as like a special edition of a record, actually, that puts it in a good perspective for me. So they are owning a copy of that. They don't just have ownership of the thing.
That's correct. They do not own my publishing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although some artists can play with that if they want to, and if they have a fan base that's interested in participating in that way. But that's not something that I've explored. Yeah.
Okay. And so when you're selling, when music and NFTs intersect like this, is that the most typical thing? It's kind of like an artist selling a print rather than the original oil painting.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I think that's the most common thing that we see like in the music NFT space is people actually selling the songs. And something that's been a part of my project with CXY, who is my collector and my patron, is experimenting with storytelling on the blockchain. So the blockchain is where cryptocurrency sits, and it's also where NFTs exist. And it's a public ledger that cannot be changed or destroyed. And so there's permanence to it. And it also tells our shared history and the history of the art. So I've been experimenting as well with sharing demos or art that I made as a kid or scans of a show that I went to and like the ticket stub, and just being able to collect and share these artifacts that I might not put on Instagram or Spotify that are still like a really important part of my artist journey.
Sort of a virtual memorabilia tickle trunk.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Period.
Okay. I understand that a little bit better now. Of course, my next question would be, so when you purchase an NFT, that's done with cryptocurrency?
Yes.
As opposed to like my Visa?
You actually can now buy NFTs with Visas.
Okay.
Yes, but it's still, the transaction will take place with crypto.
Okay.
But that is kind of behind the scenes. So people are trying to build that out more so it's more seamless. And some people have done it, but usually it's directly with crypto. Yeah.
I mean, that opens up a whole other conversation of a world that I don't understand, but we don't necessarily have to get into that here. But
yeah, it's like learning a whole new language. When I was onboarded, I was like, what is going on? But yeah.
There was something, I have no recollection of what it was, but there was something I was looking into, and it involved crypto rather than just being able to like pay with a credit card. And I was like, well, that's it. I can't buy it then because I don't understand
it's
how to do that.
It's clunky. There's a lot of steps. And that's something that we talk about all the time in the space, is making it more seamless so that more folks can participate. And there are people who are taking great steps to make that happen. And it's a process.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like possibly I'm in the wrong generation to understand cryptocurrency.
I mean,
that's a possibility.
There's folks from all generations in the space, definitely. But yeah, I mean, there's folks from all generations in the space. But it definitely, I think there needs to be like an incentive that makes sense for someone to do all the work to learn about it or to have a really smooth onboarding experience. So,
and do you see the world of like, what do you call it? An NFT museum that you built? That's what that tickle trunk is called?
Yeah, I would say, my first NFT was one of one version of my song Prophecy of the Morning Dew, which had already been out on DSPs and Spotify for years at that point. But it was just a song, it's really dear to my heart. So I thought this is a great one to start with. And someone collected it. Someone bought it for 0.69 ETH. But there was a bit of like a betting war, which was cute. And I was like, what's going on? And that money ended up being more income for the song than I think 600,000 or 700,000 streams that we'd had at the time. Wow. And so that felt, exciting. I was like, what's going on here? And
an online audience. Do you think that, like, do you sort of foresee that blossoming out into another channel that becomes part of the fabric?
I think yes and no. I think I would recommend like artists to look into the space if it aligns with their goals. And so I would ask, like, what do you want? Like, what are your intentions? What are your goals? What are your desires? I think that being an artist in the Web3 space, I have heard that it can be kind of tough to get into. And again, like for me, I had an onboarding ramp that facilitated my entryway in a way that was really easy. And
because you had a mentorship experience.
Because I had that mentorship, yeah. And there are communities that are really welcoming and that you can pull up and join the weekly voice chats, and we're going to be really glad to have you there and ask about you and just want to see what you're working on. And it's a super supportive community. Song Camp is the one I'm thinking of, and it's a community that I've run programs with. I've been a part of programs with, and I also just show up and hang out week by week just because it's so fun. Yeah. So that's, definitely a community I would recommend folks tapping in with if they are curious in the space. Okay. And I think in terms of pursuing an audience, there's a lot of support in the space. It does take time investment, but I think building an audience in any case does. So again, it just depends on what your goals are.
And what would, like, trying to figure out how to phrase this question. When you're talking about depending on what your goals are, that is or isn't
a match for it.
A match. What would distinguish that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think community in a way where, kind of like we were talking about again before we started recording, but where you were sharing about that mastermind group that you have, where it's kind of like cheering each other on, checking in on progress. I think that there's a lot of that type of community in the space, and specifically in the Song Camp community and Discord and chats. So that's something that has been really valuable for me, is finding aligned friendships and kind of like co-cheerleaders to like track each other's journey as independent artists. And also there's proximity to resources and finances because it is in the tech space. And so there's a lot of folks who are in the music NFT space that have, extra resources to spread around, to share, and who will likely collect your work when you share it.
Mm.
So I think if those are goals that you have, then it could be a match for you.
Yeah. That's I think that's really great information. And the mentorship piece that you had, do you know of programs like that run, like that people could look into moving ahead?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually ran one in the fall.
Yeah.
For my first time. It was called Starter Packs.
Love that.
And so that was really fun to bring artists through kind of what I was sharing around putting things on the blockchain that are more about our creative journeys. So telling the story of who we are as artists. And I think that contextualizes our music as well and encourages folks to collect more of our work because they can understand more about who we are. So we'll be running more cohorts for that. The next one we're going to do is actually geared towards fans and collectors to build dialogues around what they want to see from artists. But yeah, I think like keeping in touch, keeping an eye on that is an opportunity to connect in that way around mentorship. And there's also a really great community called Zoratopia, run by Latasha, who's a really awesome community builder. And she does a lot of onboarding for musicians and artists into the Web3 music space.
Great.
Yeah.
I will we'll get that info from you and link it in the show notes as well for people so that those are easy to find.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love that.
Let's talk about the intersection between your gender journey and your musical journey. How have those two things affected one another?
I think my musical journey brought me to LA in large part. Also serendipity and love, but
let's not discount those.
Let's add that in there. But LA became a space for me to really explore my gender away from my hometown and my family and folks who saw me growing up. And I think that was a really important part of me feeling like I had the freedom within myself to explore and expand and experiment. And yeah, it's been, for me, songwriting is a place where I can discover myself because someone's got to write the lyrics, And so what's true? And getting to ask myself what is true for me today when I'm in a writing session and discover that not just through words, but also through melody and sound has been, a really fantastic space for me to process and discover more about myself and my gender.
I think that and honestly, I haven't been on a gender journey. People close to me most certainly have. But I think that piece about having the space to experiment with who you are, whether that is a part of your journey of maturity or whether that is a gender journey or any other piece of self-discovery, self-actualization, I think having the freedom and the space to do that away from the places where you may feel constrained by your history, family, people who have seen you grow up, whatever. I think that's actually a really important piece for maybe more of us than
just trans folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And more of us than we give ourselves freedom to, we don't all give ourselves the freedom to have that space for exploration.
Yeah, totally.
And I think it's an important one.
Yeah.
I think we get there a lot faster.
I think that's probably true.
When we're not still trying to
make sense to people who have context of old versions of us.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So in terms of your gender journey, do you want to talk about renegotiating your relationship with your singing voice through and after your transition?
Yes.
Because that's a really specific thing to navigate. And my son went from being a soprano to a baritone.
Wow.
After transitioning.
Uh-huh.
And it took him some time to find confidence, like in his voice again, in addition to just kind of like going through puberty again.
Totally.
After starting hormone therapy.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that a
Yeah,
little bit?
for sure. I think part of why I waited as long as I did to come to terms with my maleness was because I was afraid of what testosterone would do to my singing voice. And yeah,
And you started with a very high soprano voice.
Yes. Yeah, I did. And giving up attachment to my artist identity was something that I had to do when I chose to prioritize myself over it. And I'm grateful for that feeling of having my own back. So, I mean, there's so many gems and gifts that being trans has given me. And that's a big one, is really being like, wow, like I've really got my own back and I will give up a lot to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. And it turns out that what I thought I was giving up or might be giving up, my voice, is I didn't have to give it up at all. And I can still sing, and my range is bigger than ever. And I think as well, my voice is more emotive now because it's less seamless. And so there's more grit and emotion in it, and there's more vulnerability in it. And I welcome that in my art form. So yeah, very grateful that I still have my voice and can do the things. And I can actually still sing really high and with really breathy, airy tones. And I can also resonate at deeper pitches now, which is so awesome to be able to access that. Yeah.
And I mean, just from a physical range standpoint, do you know sort of how much you did lose off the top or how much you did gain on the bottom?
That's a good question. I actually don't know exactly what that is, but I am in a choir and I'm a tenor. I can say that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and you went from being what I would have called like a first soprano. You were, because you could sing almost whistle tones, right? Like you were high. Yeah. So tenor. Yeah. That's
why I sit in my choir, but I can sing lower than that as well. But yeah. Yeah.
And so do you think overall, do you feel like your range shifted, or do you feel like it actually like shifted a bit but increased overall?
I think it probably increased and shifted down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I can still sing quite high, but then the others just more space on the bottom.
Yeah.
I think navigating the break is something that's new for me. I didn't experience a break where I was at before, but now I do. Yeah. Especially when I'm going up. Yeah. There's that kind of glottal stuffy vibe. And then on the way down, it's a little bit smoother. Yeah.
Which, just FYI, really pretty standard.
Okay, great.
Harder on the way up, a little easier on the way down.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Good to know. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
But a break can be really quite, like you say, it can be really useful in emoting, right? I have a friend who is a just gorgeous, gorgeous singer. And when she lived here, she worked hard on working the break out of her voice. And then she moved to Nashville and started working in country music and had to work the break back into her voice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
with that style of music.
Stylistically, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You have been somewhat nomadic.
Yes.
Over the last few years.
Yes.
Living in a number of different cities. Was that musically driven or part of your personal journey? And what impact did it have on your music?
Yeah, I've lived, right out of high school, I lived in Victoria for a couple of years. That was for university, and then Montreal for a short stint, university related, and then came back here. And then I moved to LA, and I was in Toronto. And then most recently I was in Oakland for a bit. So yeah, I'm really grateful to have been able to spend time living in all these different cities. And I mean, it's been, really important for my journey. And as I was sharing for my gender journey, getting to expand and experiment, but also, with just like other parts of my identity and who I am, and getting to see how different people operate within different contexts. And I love Vancouver so much, and there's a specific culture here, like there is everywhere. And so getting to be immersed in different cultures, albeit all in North America, but just seeing that there's many, many ways of doing things and of showing up and being creative has really helped to open my eyes to that possibility. And also it's given me a chance to ask myself what feels true for me and what feels resonant for my self-expression. Yeah.
And do you find that the sort of, because I know every city has their own vibe when it comes to the artist community, right? Do you find that the sort of artistic process when you're working with other people, because I know you work in collaboration a lot as well. So do you find that those shared artistic experiences are different in different places?
Yeah, I do. And I think I've also been a different person at each time. And so where I've been on my journey has informed the types of spaces that I'm in and who I'm around. And I also think that in each city, there are many different scenes. And so I only have, perspective on the spaces that I've been in, of course. But like in Toronto, for example, I was so inspired by how rich the arts scene is. And it was like the first day I got there, I looked online. I was like, what's going on here? And I found Manifesto Festival, which had one of my favorite artists playing. And it was like a toonie to get in. Yeah. BJ, the Chicago kid, who's like just epic vocalist. And I showed up for a toonie. For those who don't know what that is, it's $2.
My grandmother, when they first introduced the toonie, my grandmother couldn't remember the name, and she used to call them a foolie.
Oh my God. Basically a foolie. Yeah, pretty much.
So you showed up and paid a foolie.
So I paid a foolie, and I remember the opening artist was Adria Kane, who I hadn't heard of yet, but she was playing with a 13-piece band.
Wow.
And I was like, what is going on here? Like, I had never seen this. It was beautiful R&B soul music. And I was like, this doesn't exist in Vancouver. I've never come across this.
Yeah.
And so I, Twitter stalked everyone until I found who was behind it. And it was this dude named Donnie Milwaukee. And it turned out that he was running these underground, workshop series. One was for hip hop and MCing and freestyling. And one was for jazz and hip hop theory and how to direct a band. And so a couple times a week we would go and meet up in the basement where there was this studio that they had built and just get drilled and trained. And it was like if you passed the second tier of the freestyle competition, then you could use the band for any gig you had in Toronto. And I passed it like right away. And so I just had a band, this awesome band to gig with me.
Amazing.
The whole time I was in Toronto, and built so many amazing relationships, and learned how to direct a band and how to spot differences and mistakes that the players might be making and to correct them. And that type of like rigorous passion that caused someone to create a program like that was so accessible to the community. That was something that I was just so grateful to come across and really impacted my artist journey while I was out there.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was epic.
I have never known of a program like that.
Yeah.
So I just think that that's super cool.
Really cool.
And I don't know if those workshops are still being run.
Yeah, I don't think they are.
That's too bad.
They might be. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I was really grateful to kind of get to participate in that.
No kidding. And that skill of being able to like run a band, like as a singer, to be able to, and I don't mean just front a band. That's a skill set as well, but to be able to run a band rehearsal and, rehearse a band and all of that, basically be a band leader.
Right.
That is a skill that, there's not a lot of formal education around building that skill.
Yeah, there's not.
And there can be a lot of missteps along the way. You can piss a lot of people off.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of ways that it can go poorly. So some mentorship or some formal education or something along the way is so helpful for young singers.
Yeah.
Because it's a skill that if you are going to work live in the course of your career, it's a skill you need to know how to have.
Yeah, totally.
Unless you're only ever planning to be hired as the singer.
Right.
But if you are planning to lead the band, or it's your original music or anything like that, you got to develop those chops.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, like something that's been really helpful for me is trusting the people that I'm working with. If I'm not directly MDing the band, is trusting who is musical directing the band and their skill set. And it's certainly a skill set that I have lots more to develop in. And I am grateful for that mentorship that I've had, but along the way, being able to trust the choices and the tastes of the band members and specifically the MD has been really helpful for me too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you are working with an MD, that is, for those who don't know that terminology, that's a musical director. That is a really, really important thing too, to know that you have that trust in the musical director, because that will, again, dictate what direction it goes. Definitely. And if the musical director has strong ideas that are different from your own, you could end up with a project that doesn't sound anything like what you want.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you trust them and have faith in them and let them do what they are excellent at, you can end up with something that's so much better than what you thought you might create.
100%.
Yeah. Huge.